We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's Shoot the Sheev podcast, we are tackling probably one of the most controversial topics in Star Wars, and that is edits to the films. So when I was just trying to double check the ones that I knew off the top of my head, when I went looking for like a checklist or something, so to speak, just to make sure, I had all, if not a good chunk of them, I realized I hardly knew the surface. There are so many changes in which, when I used to hear the criticism about George Lucas changing so much about his Star Wars films, I didn't realize that there was so much more that I didn't even notice. I do have the unaltered editions of the DVDs that came out, I think, in 2006, somewhere around there. But I don't watch those on occasion. I usually just turn on whatever is the version on Disney Plus, which is the most updated version. Because if I want to watch the unaltered version, I have to put it in the disk drive, and I'm too lazy. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about probably some of the more popular things that are changes. I'm not going to get into the, they changed this one little sound segment at 1 hour 59 minutes and 2 seconds. We're not going to do that. If we are going to point out some sound bits that were altered or changed, they will be specific. It won't just be this thing was deleted. We'll have some context for you. So we're going to go over each of the original trilogy films because it was kind of in our face about all these changes for the first 3 original films. Why? Because they released special edition movies that George Lucas put millions of dollars into to update and put new changes in. So there's quite a few in those, both that came out from the theatrical release and then later on with the Blu-ray release. And then there's also a couple of them that happened with the prequels as well. So we'll talk about each of the original trilogies as their own segments, and then we'll just kind of wrap up the prequels at the very end. So Sarah, you ready to start talking some Star Wars edits?
Let's dive right in.
All right. So we're going to start with A New Hope. And again, it's not probably every single edit, but some very noteworthy ones where, if you've watched some of these films, you probably would recognize these.
Trying to hit on the big ones.
Yeah, the first one that I got here is when we first see Kenobi, when he approaches Luke after the Tusken Raiders are, trying to beat the crap out of him. We hear this noise that's like a howling noise, and it's actually been changed a couple times. And what this was is it was Kenobi's impersonation of a crate dragon trying to scare off the Sand People. And so if you, depending on the version that you watch, there's different versions of the noise. I feel like the new version, like the newest one, sounds more like a howl with a hooing, almost like it sounds like an owl. But yeah, it's very interesting the different ways that they've been altering how it sounds. I know when Sarah was glazing over this list, that was one that she had a strong opinion about. She was like, "What the heck?"
It wasn't necessarily this one specifically, but just in general, just a general idea of why would you change so much and something like that. Do we even hear a crate dragon in the films?
In the films, I don't think so. We do in The Mandalorian, but that came way later after
Is that,
this
is
stuff
that
came out.
Mandalorian or Book of Boba?
That was Mando. It was
Oh,
like
that
the
was in the
first
episode.
episode of season 2.
Okay. So, well after this was changed is when we actually heard one for the first time. So, what would be the point of changing it? Like it's not like the ooh, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here. Um there's oh what the heck, I'm just gonna do it. The Force Ghost for Anakin and how that was changed,
Oh, how
to
dare you jump ahead?
I'm jumping ahead. We'll dive more into the specific of this later. But anyway, to update the actor for it, that makes sense. But just to update the noise when you still at that point in time when he made these changes hadn't heard one yet, how would you know it's any different? What's the point of that?
Well, we don't know if Kenobi has heard one yet. I mean, George is the one making up the noises.
That's my point though, is us as the viewers, it's not they updated the noise because now we know what a crate dragon sounds like. It's he updated the noise because he wanted to for funsies.
Who knows? The next one I have is probably one of the most ridiculous ones, in my opinion, and it's right along this same scene. And this is the R2D2 behind the rock. So before R2D2 basically went into like a little hole in the wall, so to speak, while he was hiding from the Tusken Raiders. And then when the Blu-ray releases came out, they put a rock in front of R2D2 so that it looked like he was hiding. But the problem was is that the way that it looked in this shot looked like there was no way that R2 could have gotten behind that rock, as if he went behind the rock and used the force to put a rock in front of him. Um, However, they took feedback from that, and later on, I think it's on the Disney Plus version, they altered the view, like the shot, so that it is more apparent that R2 like kind of went around the rock, and now he's behind something where he could actually have gotten in there. But I do
Weird.
think the rock
I,
was ridiculous.
I didn't know they updated it since adding the rock in to change the viewpoint.
Yeah, to make it look more logical.
Some of these things, and this isn't going to be the only ridiculous one. I know that because there's many others, I'm sure. But it makes me wonder if he had a couple minor things he wanted to fix, and then he thought to himself, I can't disappoint people by having just these like two little things fixed. So I better do some other changes too so that there's more of a difference between this and so it's more of a special edition.
Well, George felt that his films were never complete. So he always taking a shower one day and is like, you know what? That should have been corrected this way. And then he just goes back in there, spends a bunch of money, and then re-releases it and makes money off of the Blu-rays. Um, that's just how the business works. The most probably controversial one of A New Hope, and that is Han versus Greedo, who shot first. So in the original, Han shot first. And then George Lucas said, if Han shoots first, then that means he pretty much kills Greedo in cold blood. And because we're trying to portray Han as a hero, he didn't want that. And so he went back in and had Greedo shoot first. That way it looked like Han was provoked. Then it made everybody upset. So when Disney took over for Star Wars, they changed it again and made it as close as possible, meaning they had both of them shoot at the same time. In my opinion, Han shot first.
Han will always have shot first. I think it's good that Disney changed it so they're at the same time instead of Greedo shooting first, just because that's change. This is gonna sound silly. I'm gonna say it anyway. Making Greedo shoot first is changing a major plot point. Like this is a debated thing of who shot first, and it was always very clear that Han shot first. Like that's a thing. It's a saying, right? So to make it so Greedo shoots first, not good. To make them so they shoot at the same time, I guess it makes more sense, but I'm still gonna say Han shot first.
Yeah, we're in agreement there. Most people are in agreement, which is I don't know why Disney doesn't just put it back to the way it should be, especially if they took the time to make it a tie.
Because then he wouldn't be a hero, I guess. I'd never heard that explanation before, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose so. The next one for A New Hope is probably one of the ones I think is pretty cool. And that is when the original cut of A New Hope came out, there were scenes filmed of Jabba, and he was a human at first. And then when they decided to add the scene that they filmed with Jabba in the special edition, they actually made him a CGI character. Why? Because when they released the special edition, Return of the Jedi had already come out. So we know what Jabba looks like, and clearly he's not a human. So they had to digitally put him in there. And honestly, I guess for the time when the special edition came out, he looked okay, looked kind of like crap. But when they did another update, I believe it was on the Blu-ray or the DVD release, they actually updated Jabba again, and they took the old CGI and replaced it with a new one, which again clearly looks like CGI, and he looks still kind of like a mess, but he looks closer to what he's known to look like. And I say the reason why it seems so off is because the other times that we see Jabba being Return of the Jedi and also the Phantom Menace when at the pod racing, both of those, at least in my opinion, for the Phantom Menace, I think they're both practical effects Jabbas, so they're real. So when they go to put the CGI one in, it's pretty clear cut that it's like, they should have. Well, I don't. It probably would have been ridiculously hard to be able to, shoot a prosthetic and then not be able to uh, put it in there. So I think Java was a pretty cool addition just to kind of give a little bit more context of um, who this was, because I believe Han references him when he's talking to Greedo. And so by adding in this little scene where they're trying to like ambush him at the Falcon, just adds another layer to that tension that he had with Java.
So I just watched this particular scene pretty recently, and you can tell there's something that's a little off. I agree that it's good that they changed it to actually look like Jabba and not just a human, because we know that Jabba's not a human. This is another one of those examples where, it makes sense to update the character after the fact because we know what they look like now. However, I think they really struggled with CGI-ing something into film that's as old as that was. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why you can kind of see it and it's more apparent when you're watching, is the depth perception of Han versus Jabba. It doesn't really line up super great. And so some of the times it's almost like, you know, they put Jabba behind him, so he's constantly looking back and like pointing back and moving his hands to talk, and kind of looking back at Jabba. And so some of the times it almost looks like his hand, depth perception wise, is as far back as Jabba, like as if his hand would be in Jabba or his feet would be in Jabba's belly.
Which is actually interesting because even when Han and Jabba are interacting, there's even a part where like Han steps over Jabba's tail. I think he even steps on it because Jabba like howls, um, because Han goes around behind him.
I don't remember that part specifically. The part that I was referencing, his tail was facing the other way and he was more by his face. But there's something off about the depth perception. Like clearly Han is in front of Jabba, but it almost looks like he's reaching through him or walking through him. It just looks, there's something just off. There's something off about either the sizing or maybe the angling of the characters. I'm not sure, but the spatial distance. Just there's something weird about it.
Yeah. A couple more here that I do want to squeeze in for the A New Hope section. One, Luke's lightsaber color was actually updated when he's training on the Falcon with the little training droid. At first, when that was released, the lightsaber kind of like had a green tint to it, and it wasn't like blue when it was supposed to be. And so they went back in and restored that to make sure it looks like the actual blue it's supposed to be. So that's a really good one. Uh, Also, kind of along the same lines with the lightsabers, during the battle between Kenobi and Vader, when they first released Star Wars, uh, there were certain shots where it kind of looked like Kenobi's lightsaber was shrinking based on the angle that it was pointing at the screen. And I kind of felt that way when I was watching it as a kid at times. Like there's a scene where or an angle where Kenobi is kind of like doing one of these numbers and the saber is pointing directly at the camera with a slight angle. And the way that it looks just kind of looks like it's shrinking. So they went back in and updated that as well. Probably one of the more funny ones that was added in was when the group is on the Death Star and they got Leia already and they're trying to get back to the ship. There is a part where Han and Luke and Leia split, and Han goes chasing after the stormtroopers that had just found them, and he tells Luke and Leia to like get to the ship, and I'll be right behind you. And so Han is like running around these corridors, chasing the stormtroopers, and then he comes around a corner and he like screams because he runs into a group of stormtroopers. And in the original, he ran into a few stormtroopers. But when they edited it, they made it like, I don't know, like 20 stormtroopers that were in that room. So then he like blasts one and then he runs back in the other direction, being chased by the stormtroopers at that point. It's probably one of those where people thought it was goofy, but at the same time, I think it is supposed to be because of the way he screams and, turns around and runs the other way. A couple other ones real quick. The explosions to Alderaan and the Death Star were updated between the originals and the special editions. So the exploding effects were updated. And then also one last thing I want to put in here is because this was like a deleted scene that was added in to the special edition is when Luke is getting ready to hop in his X-Wing and, go off towards the Death Star. He talks to one of his friends from back home, being Biggs. And they talk about, what's happened a little bit between the time that Biggs left for the rebellion and then kind of like a 2-minute catch up. But it adds a little bit more to the element of when, Luke is depending on Biggs to help him out when they're in the battle above the Death Star. Because he says at one point, "Blast it, Biggs, where are you?" Because he's waiting on Biggs to take out the dude behind him. So it kind of adds a little bit more to the character. I think what would add even more would be if they added the other deleted scene, which they still haven't done yet, where in the beginning of the movie, Luke, and I think it was Biggs, I'm pretty sure, it's where they got their binoculars and they're looking up in the sky and they can actually see the Star Destroyer that is above the planet, because that's the one that captured Leia's shuttle, and the two of them go back and forth talking about joining the rebellion and stuff. So I feel like adding that in there would add a little bit more, but maybe it would add too much and maybe lessen the effect of the one that we did get. So who knows? If you want to see that deleted scene, it is definitely out there on YouTube and maybe on some like special feature discs. When we come back, we are going to move on to Empire Strikes Back, so stay tuned. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk about the edits that happened to The Empire Strikes Back as time went on. Of course, tons of things have happened since the release, but we got a handful of the ones that are like the major ones to point out. And oddly enough, there's one in here that was like driving me nuts for the longest time, and I cannot wait to talk about it. Um, but we'll get there. We're going to try to go in order that things happen in the movie. So the first one is something that I thought was a really good addition, and I want your input too, Sarah. Believe it or not, in the original Star Wars film, when Luke is like strapped up in the cave, the Wampa cave, the Wampa is not shown in that scene. All you hear is the howling and like shots of like the direction that the Wampa is in comparison to Luke. So the special edition added the Wampa like coming towards Luke and then Luke chopping off his arm and then you hear it like roar. What'd you think of that?
I did not realize or did not remember that you didn't used to see him. So the fact that he was missing before, I think was a misstep, and I'm glad that they put him back in there.
I think we saw its face like when it first attacks Luke out in the snow. But as far as being in the cave, for the most part, it was just the howls. So
I feel
yeah,
like
that was
it adds more scariness.
yeah, because then you get to see the creature, especially since he was like munching on the the tauntaun. He's just going to town on that sucker like it's a chicken leg from KFC.
Who doesn't
So
like a tauntaun ribeye?
I don't know. That sounds delicious. Disney, get on it. Or they could have like little stations of resting where you can sleep in a tauntaun. That'd be awesome.
Yes, it's like napping pods.
Yeah. This next one is something that was shocking to me as of late. Like I've learned more about it this year, and this is kind of a two-parter, but it happens in the same scene. So this scene is when Vader is alerted that the Emperor wants to speak to him. So Vader goes to his little quarters so that he can talk to his master. In the original cut, the Emperor image was a female and that played the role. And then they had a male voice over it, which was really weird. So the image was of a female, but the speaking was of a guy. And then when the prequels were all done and George was getting ready to make the DVDs, the same DVDs that had Hayden Christensen added into it, they instead added Ian McDiarmid. So they went from female body, male voice to the man himself, because Ian McDiarmid is the one that played the Emperor in the originals. So as far as an edit of putting the real actor that played that character in, I think that's awesome.
So,
Go ahead.
are you trying to say that Ian McDiarmid just did the voice and it was a female visual? Or was it not even Ian McDiarmid's voice for that
I
one?
don't think it was McDiarmid's voice.
So he didn't join the team until episode 6?
Correct.
Interesting.
This might be a loaded one to look up for IMDb. I don't know if they're gonna be like, oh, it was updated to McDiarmid or something like that. Looking it up really quick. It's a good question, but my gut tells me that it was not. Because when I was double checking, I feel like that was not part of it. No, it was not him. It
He
was
wasn't the voice.
Clive Rivel.
Interesting.
So Ian McDiarmid did not come on to Star Wars until episode 6, but they redid it and put him in later on. Did you want
Good.
to say anything else about that?
No, just that, I appreciate consistency.
So here's where because speaking of consistency, here's one of the things that I really did not like about that scene. So when they switched over to Ian McDiarmid, they actually changed the lines in the whole scene. And it's interesting because the original had this this idea that Vader like had no idea of Luke's identity. He just knew that it was a rebel fighter that blew up the Death Star, and that he knew that whoever that was, something was special about him. When they updated it to Ian McDiarmid, they changed it where the Emperor, I believe it was the Emperor, tells Vader that it's the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. So like Vader tells the or like they tell the audience that Vader is Luke's father before the iconic moment even happens.
Weird.
Do you see
I
the
did
problem with
not
that?
pick up on that.
Yeah, so like when I watch that scene, it kind of makes me cringe because it ruins that big moment.
Yeah.
It seems like it was not necessary.
I appreciate adding in the correct person, but I feel like the lines shouldn't have been changed if that's what they changed them to.
Oh yeah, they flat out changed the whole scene. So, and it was super easy for them because really all they had to do was film Ian McDiarmid, and he did his lines, and then you can't see Vader's mouth, so they just had James Earl Jones record in the studio, and then they just pasted it in there. So yeah, that was one of those edits where I really liked that Ian McDiarmid was updated, but my goodness, you completely ruined the scene based on the dialogue. So um yeah, it's a really hard thing to get over. This next one that I have on here is one that I do like. I'm sure the guy that played Boba Fett in the original didn't appreciate this, but when George Lucas was updating things after the prequels were made, he had Tamora Morrison record the lines of Boba Fett and then had those uh, be put in instead of the original Boba Fett actor's voice. That way, he sounded more consistent with what he would have actually sounded like. It's as if Tamora Morrison played Boba in the past, so to speak. Again, you said you like consistency, so that's a good one that they did there.
I do.
Um, Here's one that maybe isn't as obvious, especially if you haven't seen the two versions of the film. When Empire Strikes Back first came out, Cloud City, so like when our heroes are walking through the halls of the city and whatnot, and Lando is showing them around, and later on when they're, trying to run away from the Empire and escape Cloud City, they filmed it so that a lot of Cloud City was just the hallways. And so we really didn't get much of a perspective of the outside of the walls. And so what they did for the special editions is they went in and they put backgrounds in, so to speak. So when something was basically a big long hallway, well, now it is basically a platform that opens up to the outside, and you can see more of the Cloud City lifestyle as characters are going past different areas. So basically, they took that white wall, used it as a green screen, and then plastered in, what the city looks like on the outside of those walls because we didn't get much of an idea. All right. Should we talk about the one that drove me nuts?
Yes.
So here's the one that drove me nuts because growing up, I'm like, I could have sworn this was happening, and now it's not happening anymore. Did it happen or did it not? And if you watch the original, so this is what happens. Luke and Vader, at the end of their fight, after Luke has got his hand cut off, and Vader tells Luke that he's his father, and Vader is basically offering his hand to Luke to help him. Funny choice of words. Luke decides not to join him and decides to just fall down the shaft to some, like trash vent. As he falls, and I believe in the original, he does not scream. Like, you can't hear him screaming. In the special editions, they took the screaming from the Emperor when he was falling in Return of the Jedi and dubbed it over so that it sounded like Luke was screaming as he was falling down that shaft and then eventually into the little trash shaft area. And then must have gotten bad feedback because they took it out. Now there's no scream. So it drives me nuts when I watch that segment thinking I would be screaming if I was falling like that. And now we see Luke looking up with his mouth open and nothing. We just hear music. What do you think, Sarah? I have strong feelings.
So let me get this straight. They show him where it looks like he's screaming, and they were showing, you were able to hear all the dialogue up until this point, and then all of a sudden you just don't hear the scream. But
Yeah,
it
they
looks
cut
like,
it out.
but it looks like he's screaming.
Yeah, it looks like he's screaming and he's just falling with, one less hand.
Why would you not have a scream in there?
My
I,
guess
I
is,
I can see why it might be weird or off-putting to have. You said it was the Emperor's scream they put in there?
yeah, they dubbed it over. So because they you know, I don't want to get to it yet because we're going to be talking about it soon. But yes, they took a sound clip from one thing and dubbed it over. It's not like they couldn't call Mark Hamill and be like, "Yo, can you come in here and scream for like 5 minutes? We need to put this in the show to make it more authentic." But
Can you imagine
yeah,
getting a phone call? Hey, I need to record you screaming.
yeah, sounds good. Make like $100 or something.
I think it'd be one thing if you couldn't see him screaming, then I can make sense to not hear it because, you don't see it. But if you see him screaming and you can't hear it, that's annoying.
Yeah. So that one, it really grinds my gears. Family Guy reference. Whenever I see that, so please stop messing with my movies. The last one that I want to bring up for The Empire Strikes Back is so after Luke falls and he's left, Vader is going to be going back to his shuttle. And we get this shot of Vader walking through the halls of Cloud City. And what they do is they changed what he says. In the original version, Vader tells the officer, bring my shuttle. And that's it. Whereas the updated version, Vader says, alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival. And then we actually see him walk out to the ship. So his ship has already been prepared. That might be why they got rid of that, or maybe it was just an awkward piece of dialogue in there. But one extension that I want to add on to this
We just
is
said
that
they changed it to that.
they changed it to alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be bring my shuttle, even though the shuttle was already there.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, because we see him walk through the halls and then the camera shifts to showing him walking on the platform to his ship. So it makes sense. The extension to this is that when Vader actually gets to the Star Destroyer, because this was not part of the original, when he gets to the Star Destroyer and he goes in and he lands, and then the like docking thing comes down and he walks out of his shuttle. Those were scenes that were pulled from, I believe, the deleted scenes of Return of the Jedi, or alternative angles for the shots when Vader arrives, because that was not a scene that they had shot at that point. So stay with me here. When we see Vader land the shuttle and he gets off the shuttle, the hangar that he technically is in is the second Death Star. But because all the hangars look the same, that's why they thought it was okay to put it in here as the Star Destroyer. Mind-blowing, isn't it?
Can you visually see a difference?
No. Because like I said, all the hangers are the same. So
Right.
that's why, they felt they could just put it in there. But
We can get away with this.
yeah, and you know what? They did. They did get away with it. Um, any thoughts before we head to our break?
Most of them have seemed reasonable. Some of them seem silly.
Some of them seem absolutely dumb, like the dialogue change for the conversation between Vader and the Emperor.
I was trying to be nice, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, they need to hear this. I mean, they heard some things in the past were stupid, so they changed it. So maybe we can get this back. Who knows? Ian McDermott is still alive and very well. He can go back in there and change it. Um, when we come back, we are moving on to Return of the Jedi. We do have a good handful here and some actually pretty interesting edits. So stay tuned. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. Welcome back. We are here to start talking about Return of the Jedi now, as far as the different edits that have happened throughout the years, and see which ones we thought were good and which ones we think are trash. All right. So the first one that I want to talk about came from the Blu-ray edits, and that was that Jabba's palace door was made to look humongous. In the original shot from I would say anything that was before the Blu-ray. So the original version, the special edition, and I think the DVD releases as well. Jabba's Palace's door seemed like a fairly average-looking big door, whereas the Blu-ray version made that door huge.
Would you say like the equivalent of used to be a garage door, but now you could land a ship in there?
Oh yeah, yep. Because I think it's, I don't know. I want to say yes, that you could fly a ship through there. I can't remember if it's the same door that they used in Book of Boba when he stole back his ship. That I don't remember. But yeah, the door is really, really big. Very small thing. When you're having like small shots of the desert, they added some banthas in there. One of the really cool things that I really liked was that for the Sarlacc pit, they added tentacles. So the original version was just like this like teeth thing in the ground, like a hole. And then when the special editions came out, they added the tentacles and the mouth. It wasn't just a hole in the ground. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it added more to that monster.
Doesn't one of the characters, and I don't know who, I think it's just a generic somebody, but doesn't one of somebody get like wrapped up in a tentacle and then eaten? Or am I just imagining that?
I think like a random dude gets wrapped up and pulled in, but there is also a scene where Lando gets wrapped up and then they eventually get him away from it. I think Han shoots the tentacle while he's half blind, and
I
then
think you're right.
yeah, then he's able to get away.
I like the tentacles. I think they're neat.
So I guess to clarify, I'm sure that was in the original, like those tentacles, because that was like one that they, launched upward towards Lando and whatnot. But as far as like these CGI edits, it's like when you're just looking down into the pit, if that makes sense.
So they added more.
Yes, they added more to the creature, which made it, in my opinion, look more cool, more lifelike. One interesting thing that was added was that even though C-3PO translates what Jabba says throughout the movie, they added in the subtitles. So when Jabba speaks, you can see subtitles of what he's saying, but then as soon as you read what he says, C-3PO tells you what he says. So Not really sure what the point of that one was.
Maybe it's consistency because for the what is it? A New Hope, I think when we see Jabba, there's subtitles for him talking.
that's true. Yeah, there are subtitles there. So I guess, yeah, maybe to be consistent. That sounds good.
That's my
There
default go-to, so.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one for George to do where he could be like, "Yo, what do I have to tell you? It happened in the fourth movie. Why wouldn't it happen in the sixth movie? You know?" So in the crowd in Jabba's palace, they added a Doug, which was interesting. So Sebulba's race, they added one of those dudes in there. Probably one of the biggest talking points of Jabba's palace was that the Max Rebo band went from like 3 people to like almost 12. And it's because when George first made Return of the Jedi, he didn't have the technology or he didn't want to spend the money to make the technology where the characters' mouths could lip sync properly. He had a lot of issues with that initially, so that's why he only had a couple band members that just kind of played in the background during that scene. But he wanted like a small little musical number. So when the special edition came out, it was kind of like a little stage show that was implemented. There's the scene where the one dude comes up to the screen and opens his mouth and does the big note, and you can see the saliva swishing in his mouth. It's kind of weird. But honestly, it's the version that I grew up with, so I think the Max Rebo band is just fine to me. What do you think?
I could do without seeing that guy's tonsils.
Oh, you don't like his tonsils?
No, he's weird.
Eh. You think that guy's weird? What about the girl with the long snout and the little lips? What about that girl? She's
She's
weird.
pretty weird too. I don't know how I used to watch the original, but I feel like this is one of those instances where I remember what they used to look like, or remember a time where it wasn't the tonsils guy and the weird mouth lady. Again, I don't know when I saw them, but I feel like I remember seeing this scene without them, and I feel like they're so ridiculous. I don't know why we needed them.
We should watch our originals again sometime. That would be fun. Still sticking in Java's palace. One of the things that was added later on, it's a very quick scene, so if you don't catch it, that's probably why. But there's a scene where Boba is actually flirting with a girl in the palace. He like rubs his finger on her chin to try to grab her attention, like eyes here kind of a thing, even though you can't see his own eyes. He's got his mask on. And she's kind of like, oh, like she's happy about him interacting with her. So this was actually even a scene that the original actor wasn't most thrilled to see added into the special edition, just because he felt it didn't fit with Boba's character. So it was very interesting to me. It was kind of that dynamic from The Last Jedi where Mark Hamill said to Rian Johnson, yo, this isn't Luke Skywalker, and you're gonna do all this stuff. And the guy that played Boba did the same thing for George, except for it was a much smaller scale. George didn't make a whole movie where Boba is like flirting with every girl and he's the new playboy of Star Wars. Whereas Rian Johnson took Luke Skywalker and destroyed him. So, at least it's something very subtle.
Not at all salty about that, huh?
No, not at all. I think I have one more here for Jabba's palace, and this one is so during the Max Rebo scene, there is a Twi'lek dancer that is dancing in the middle of the room, and Jabba pushes the button so that she goes down, and he feeds her to the Rancor. Now, in the original version of this scene, the Twi'lek is dropped down, and then we don't see what happens to her. We just kind of hear the screams. And so it's left a mystery of what is actually down there, what does it look like. Whereas the special edition shows her fall down there. We see the cave, and then we just kind of see her face as she's terrified when the door starts to open, and she screams, and then we hear the Rancor scream, and it just kind of gives us an idea of what is down there later on when 3PO is saying to Luke, like, yo, you're standing on it, and when he's standing right above the Rancor pit. One thing I did not know when I was looking this up was that when they added the scene in, it was not a deleted scene. They actually called the actors back 10 years later and was like, yo, can we film this real quick? And then put it in. And so that there is a 10-year gap for that character, like visually, even though they try to make it look really close, but some people say they can see a difference, something to do with the makeup. But I just thought it was interesting that how that all went down. Like they actually called her back and they, filmed it. It wasn't just something that they threw in at the end.
Interesting.
This one is definitely up Sarah's alley. The Ewoks blink. What in the world?
They blink now, Jeremy.
They blink now, and it's somewhat terrifying. This was a Blu-ray edit. So when the Blu-rays came out, they added in there that now Ewoks blink during the film, which of course creatures blink, but there's like a terrifying factor of it, of like, when you see it.
Well, it's because you think of them as like teddy bears, and teddy bears don't blink. That'd be scary.
Yeah, except for Ted.
Well, he's scary all on his own. He's not a children's toy.
What are you talking about? Ted? The one from the comedy movie with Mark Wahlberg.
Yes, he is not for children.
Oh yeah, he's not for children, but he's not like a scary murderer thing.
Oh, no, I'm saying he's not for kids.
Yeah,
Ewoks are for kids and me because I'm a kid at heart.
yeah, that's true. So yeah, like Sarah said, they blink now.
I could take it or leave it. It's not that big of a deal to me. It's weird. It makes sense, I suppose, but they have giant eyes. Of course it's gonna look weird when they blink,
Yeah, it makes me wonder, which I have not seen these movies, but there's a couple of Ewok movies on Disney Plus. I wonder if they blink in those movies.
Don't know, but it's on my watch list and we're gonna watch it soon.
Yeah, we'll be doing a little podcast thing about it, Shoot the Sheev eventually. So I have not seen those films. So, and Sarah, you said you haven't seen those films?
I want to say I've seen maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, that's about how much I saw. To be fully transparent. But it'll basically be like a first impression when we see those movies. All right, we got 3 more here I want to or 4 more here I want to talk about for Return of the Jedi. The first one, that's the next one. Wow. Hey, wait a minute. Okay, you have my list. That's why you said that.
I do.
Yeah, I forgot. Sarah has my list of scenes I want to talk about. So, yeah, the next one is Vader's no at the end of Return of the Jedi when Luke is getting zapped and he goes to pick up the Emperor. He says no, like he does in Revenge of the Sith. And in Revenge of the Sith, it's cringy enough, and it made it super cringy when he did it here because they tried to like make it poetic where it kind of echoes the 2 trilogies. But my goodness, it just didn't sound good. It did not sound good. Nothing. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you were gonna say something.
I was waiting for you to go on to the next one.
Yeah, we can move on to the next one. The edit with the no, terrible. The next one was one I thought was really interesting because I was watching this scene for years and I was like, something's different about this, and I can't put my finger on it. when Luke takes off Vader's helmet, like when he has Vader propped up on the Lambda shuttle at the very end in the hangar, and Vader says, "Help me take this mask off." Luke takes the mask off. Now, in the original, we had the original actor who played, Anakin, in the suit, all that good stuff, like the one that's the Force ghost at the end. In the newer versions, so that they can match the fact that Anakin was burnt, at the end of Revenge of the Sith, they make a point to have his eyebrows missing because they got turned in the Mustafar scenes. So I was like, that's what it is. He's missing his eyebrows. And then they also changed his eye color to match Hayden Christensen's eye color. Wow.
It makes sense.
It's the little things, I suppose. Like I said, it was one of those things, like when I saw it, something did not feel right. Like I couldn't put my finger on it. And then, once I saw the comparison, I was like, it makes sense. I suppose it's all about the little things. Wow, I guess attention to detail. To go along with that one, yes, at the end, Sarah kind of mentioned it already. Hayden Christensen does replace the original actor that played Anakin at the very end of Return of the Jedi. And then there's one last thing I wanted to mention about Return of the Jedi, especially because it's something that a lot of people have a decently strong opinion about. The Ewok celebration at the end was changed. There was a song in place when the original came out, and what happened was that when George wanted to update his films, the prequels had come out, and when they filmed Return of the Jedi, the problem is that when they showed that the Empire had fallen, they only showed planets that were shown in the original trilogy. So George wanted to add in some of the planets that were in the prequel trilogy also at the end here to show that they were liberated as well, like Naboo. Supposedly there's like a Gungan thing in there as well. Trying to remember all the different ones. I remember Naboo. Regardless, there's like 2 or 3 added planets at the very end of Return of the Jedi, and because they add in scenes, it has to be longer. So instead of just finding a way to make the original song a little bit longer, George had them redo the entire song. So there's a completely new Ewok celebration song at the end of Return of the Jedi, all just so that he could insert some of his prequel stuff at the very end.
I don't remember what the song used to sound like, but I'm curious to hear it now.
Yeah, the original song, I think, was Yub Nub.
Mm.
And I don't know what the new one is called. But that's what we got for you for Return of the Jedi. And then when we come back, we're going to wrap it up. And we're going to talk about a handful of things that happened with the prequel movies. So stay tuned. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of The Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. Welcome back for the final segment here of our Shoot the Sheev. We're talking about the different edits that happened to the Star Wars films between the time that they're released and what we have now, and sometimes what happens in between. So, on this last little segment, we want to put together what happened with the prequel movies. There aren't a whole lot of edits amongst the 3 of them, so that's why we didn't dedicate a whole portion to them. But we're going to go ahead and talk about them all together here. The one that probably has the most attention as far as edits is The Phantom Menace. Not because people thought it was crappy, but because there was a handful of things that George added in and things that he took out. And we've talked about on this channel before on some of the Shoot the Sheaves, is that there were times where he would like add things in, take things out, and then later switch it up again. And it was just like, which one is it? Which one? So let's talk about a couple of these. The first one I want to talk about is when Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are on the Trade Federation ship, and Qui-Gon puts his lightsaber in the door and he's trying to melt it so they can get to Nute Gunray. Eventually, droidekas show up, and so Obi-Wan tells him, and they're deflecting the blaster fire from the droidekas, and they do a force speed. Like I think it's the first time we ever see force speed on the big screen. And the original edit was like really choppy. Like it looked low quality. And since then, they've gone in there and smoothed it out a little bit, so it looks a bit more realistic. I do air quotes because force speed is an actual thing,
What
but
is force speed?
being able to run really fast, like super fast. Like, you remember when we watched the 2D Clone Wars and Mace Windu was just like darting through the battlefield? Yeah, force speed. And it's not, I mean, you get to see it for a split second of them doing force speed, but what's interesting is the next shot, it shows the droidekas like chasing them down the hallway. They're just turning the corner and shooting in their direction. But like Qui-Gon and Kenobi are like way down the hallway. So that's kind of how they paint that effect in there. Let's see. The pod race. So that was a big one that had a lot of edits that happened to it. First and foremost, the beginning of the pod races, the updated version, they actually introduced way more of the racers. So in the original version, I think they only did like 4 or 5. Whereas the updated version, which is the one that's out now, like on Disney Plus and stuff, I think they introduce most, if not all, the racers. So that was a really cool edit. I thought that was really nice for them to go in, give these racers a little bit more identity, so that when some of them crash in the race, it gives a little bit more a feeling of, I knew that dude a little bit. As opposed to they're just some NPC that crashed into a wall. So I really liked that. They also added in scenes during the pod race, so there's a couple of things that are added in there that just kind of it makes the race longer, but it flushes it out a little bit. The original version of the race, lap 2 specifically, seemed a little shorter than all of them, just in terms of screen time. And so they went in and added in some things that they didn't have originally. One of the examples is there is a part where Anakin's pod racer, like the cable breaks, and then he like spins in a circle a ton of times. And he has to take this big thing that looks like a big old hammer out, and he uses it to like magnetize the cable and pulls it back to his pod racer. That scene in particular, that's one of them that was added in. So if you see it, that was not part of the original. Okay. The next one we got was from Coruscant. So like when they're done with Tatooine and they head to Coruscant so that Padme can go talk to the Senate. We get this small added scene where, before we didn't really know where Anakin and Jar Jar went after this communication took place. So they actually show them getting into a taxi and then going off to a building. So you have some sense of where they're going. Was it necessary? Not too sure. There was some sound changes that were done in the film. I think I mentioned when we did our talk about the Phantom Menace In general, I mentioned that there's a couple of like R2D2 beeps that were taken out when Padme reveals that she's the actual queen, which I think was interesting. Like I don't see the need to have them in, but the fact that I heard them 100 times before kind of feels off when I don't hear them now. Um, but I guess
Or
I
if
could,
me and you waited so long to watch these movies, you don't remember what the old version is.
yeah. So it doesn't really bother Sarah, and I bet you maybe if you do see the older version, it might be distracting. Like the woman is trying to talk here. R2D2, shut it, shutty, as our favorite Doug Heffernan would say. Oh, and there's a couple other scenes that had some vocal stuff. Apparently, there was a scene where Watto yelled or screamed Sebulba's name. That was cut from the film. And then there was so when Padme calls for what's that called? A vote for no confidence, I think is what it was. When she was saying that Chancellor Valorum wasn't doing his job and then they needed a new chancellor. In the original version of the Phantom Menace, the crowd is chanting vote now, so that they can figure out who's going to be the new chancellor right away. And instead of doing that, they actually changed it so that now it's just crowd noise, just like muffling. It's not them begging for a vote, which I thought was interesting because uh, the person that's coaching Padme through this is at the time Senator Palpatine, and he's the one that wants to get the position. So I feel like the whole like vote now urgency may have like added into the idea that the chancellor is trying to get in there really quickly, or senator is trying to get the chancellor position really quickly. I felt like it gave it more urgency, but um, it's gone now.
I feel like general crowd noise gives it more of a sense of the people being conflicted on what to do.
Probably, uh, it's my guess is that's what the explanation would be if we got one. Um, I don't know. I think it's just it doesn't really matter what it was. Like it's not groundbreaking, so I don't really love it or hate it. It's just yeah. And then the last thing, Sarah, why don't you talk about this last thing for the Phantom Menace? Because I think for the longest time it was one of the things that drove you nuts.
I don't know what the edit was, but I see on the sheet you have written CGI Yoda. The Yoda in this movie, towards the end of the film, when they're doing the battling in the Senate Hall or Senate
Nope.
office, whatever you want to call it,
Wrong movie.
then can you please remind me what we're talking about?
Yeah. The Phantom Menace had a puppet Yoda at first, and he, in my opinion, he looked ridiculous. Um,
Was it not the original? Like the
it
original
was
puppet
not the
Yoda?
original puppet. No. Mm-mm. I think they tried to make him look a little younger, but really, probably between episode one and when we see him in episode five is, I don't know, maybe 50 years. And when he's like 800 something years old, I don't really think there's going to be that much of a change within those 50 years. But the change is that once Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith was out and they went to, update these movies, they actually went back in and put a CGI Yoda to match Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I
See,
su- I support it.
what I was going to reference was from a different movie because I still have a hard time keeping track of what's from what movie. But my general thought is still the same, that the CGI Yoda is not good, and as Jeremy would say, for when he says something's not good, is trash. It just, the movements are too quick for a creature that's over 800 years old, that we're used to seeing very brittle and old and frail. And with a puppet, you kind of are forced to move a little slower because somebody's actually having to move this thing, whereas CGI, you can have it move as fast as you want to. And I feel like the movements are not very realistic for a creature of that age, and it just looks silly and ridiculous.
I would say I was in that same boat when I first saw it. And to a point, still today, I still kind of have that feeling. I don't like Yoda's fighting style. Like you said, the whole bouncing around. My opinion isn't because I don't feel it's realistic. I just feel that it just looks terrible. And also when you're using him in Star Wars Battlefront, it is super impractical. It sucks because you're trying to go for somebody and he jumps the other way, you know? So yeah, I'm like 1 foot on your side and 1 foot on my own side on that one. Um, Sounds like Axel had a rebuttal. Attack of the Clones. I only have a couple for Attack of the Clones and a couple for Revenge of the Sith. Attack of the Clones, probably the most in your face one that was changed was that when Anakin's having his nightmare scene, we actually hear his mom calling his name. So in the original, that wasn't a thing. But when they did Revenge of the Sith, you know, we kind of got that visual of Padme screaming during childbirth. So we kind of had some sort of audible representation of what he was going through. So I think that's kind of why they added it in here. Um, I would say I like it. I would
I
say
like
I
it.
like that edit. It makes sense.
It was a good one.
The other thing that was for Attack of the Clones, which is very, very minor, and you probably won't notice it unless you're like really looking for it. Some of the shots from the original cut of Attack of the Clones were rearranged a little bit during the scene with the power couplings, which is when Anakin took the speeder on Coruscant and flew through the electricity when Obi-Wan told him not to. There's a couple scenes there that I guess are jumbled around. And then also after Yoda and Dooku's fight, there's a couple of scenes there that are shuffled around um, that apparently don't line up with the music as well. So why they did it? My guess is they were trying to show a little bit more separation, like when Padme arrives and when Dooku escapes. But I feel like that's one that they could have left alone and nobody would have batted an eye. All right, last two here. They're both for Revenge of the Sith. The last two. One, I actually did really like, and when I first heard it, I thought it was a good addition. And that is when the clone troopers emerge into the battle on Utapau. You can actually hear the clones talking to each other, like they're telling people like move, 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 or fire, or whatever they're saying. We actually get some context to that. Whereas in the original, we just kind of saw them, repel from the ceilings, and then they're just doing their thing. They're like quiet soldiers. So I thought it was cool to add that in there because I'm pretty sure they would be more inclined to do what they are doing now than what they were doing before.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, and then the other things that were part of some of the changes for Revenge of the Sith are very, very small cosmetic things. Some of them are like adding some more moss or rust to the top of the Kashyyyk houses. I guess there's a small edit but on the scene of Mustafar with Padme and Anakin when like her shuttle arrives, but again, they're so small where if you're not looking for them, it's not going to jump out to you. So wouldn't worry too much about those. And honestly, I don't worry about them because don't really notice them. So anything you want to add in here before we send off?
Just I guess final remarks for, special edition edits and whatnot for Star Wars in general. It's very strange to me that they've done so many edits to the films after their initial release. I don't know of any other movies that do this where they do so many changes or even any changes after the film's release. Part of that is because I haven't looked for it, but part of it is also that it's not something that's widely advertised or talked about, whereas they came out with special editions, like special edition Blu-rays, advertising that they had done so many changes to these films. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg, right? In terms of, is it my fault for not researching or their fault for, not advertising, meaning other films advertising these changes. So it's really weird that somebody would do so many changes over an entire franchise like this. Many of them do make sense, which is nice, but also many of them are a little silly or even ridiculous and unnecessary. So I don't know. It's kind of one of those things that's pretty strange that they've gone through so much effort. I like some of it and I don't like some of it.
Yeah. I think that, like you said, it's like kind of a half and a half. Half of them are good, half of them are crap. Didn't need to happen. Yeah. So this was this week's episode of Shoot the Sheev. We talked about the different edits that have happened with the Star Wars films, at least some of the major ones that have happened, that you can definitely spot in the different films. If you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We like to do Shoot the Sheaves on Wednesdays, so if you enjoy them, look forward to them then. Drop us a like if you like the video and drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on the Star Wars edits throughout the years. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.